Making an orator. In the school at Whilomville, it was the habit, when children had progressed to a certain class, to have them devote Friday afternoon to what was called elocution. This was in the piteously ignorant belief that orators were thus made. By process of school law, unfortunate boys and girls were dragged up to address their fellow scholars in the literature of the mid-century. Probably the children who were most capable of expressing themselves, the children who were most sensitive to the power of speech, suffered the most wrong. Little blockheads who could learn 8 lines of conventional poetry and could get up and spin it rapidly at their classmates did not undergo a single pang. The plan operated mainly to agonize many children permanently against arising to speak their thought to fellow creatures. Jimmy Trescott had an idea that by exhibition of undue ignorance he could escape from being promoted into the first-class room, which exacted such penalty from its inmates. He preferred to dwell in a less classic shade, rather than venture into a domain where he was obliged to perform a certain duty which struck him as being worse than death. However, willy-nilly he was somehow sent ahead into the place of torture. Every Friday, at least 10 of the little children had to mount the stage beside the teacher's desk and babble something which none of them understood. This was to make them orators. If it had been ordered that they should croak like frogs, it would have advanced most of them just as far towards oratory. Alphabetically, Jimmy Trescott was near the end of the list of victims, but his time was none the less inevitable. Tanner, Timmins, Trescott. He saw his downfall approaching. He was passive to the teacher while she drove into his mind the incomprehensible lines of The Charge of the Light Brigade. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward. He had no conception of a league. If in the ordinary course of life somebody had told him that he was half a league from home, he might have been frightened that half a league was 50 miles. But he struggled manfully with the Valley of Death and a mystic 600, who were performing something there which was very fine, he had been told. He learned all the verses. But as his own Friday afternoon approached, he was moved to make known to his family that a dreadful disease was upon him, and was likely at any time to prevent him from going to his beloved school. On the great Friday, when the children of his initials were to speak their pieces, Dr. Trescott was away from home, and the mother of the boy was alarmed beyond measure at Jimmy's curious illness, which caused him to lie on the rug in front of the fire and groan cavernously. She bathed his feet in hot mustard water until they were lobster red. She also placed a mustard plaster on his chest. He announced that these remedies did him no good at all, no good at all. With an air of martyrdom, he endured a perfect downpour of motherly attention all that day. Thus the first Friday was passed in safety. With singular patience, he sat before the fire in the dining room and looked at picture books, only complaining of pain when he suspected his mother of thinking that he was getting better. The next day being Saturday and a holiday, he was miraculously delivered from the arms of disease, and went forth to play a blatantly healthy boy. He had no further attack until Thursday night of the next week, when he announced that he felt very, very poorly. The mother was already chronically alarmed over the condition of her son, but Dr. Trescott asked him questions which denoted some incredulity. On the third Friday, Jimmy was dropped at the door of the school from the doctor's buggy. The other children, notably those who had already passed over the mountain of distress, looked at him with glee, seeing in him another lamb brought to butchery. Seated at his desk in the schoolroom, Jimmy sometimes remembered with dreadful distinctness every line of The Charge of the Light Brigade, and at other times his mind was utterly empty of it. Geography, arithmetic, and spelling, usually great tasks, quite rolled off him. His mind was dwelling with terror upon the time when his name should be called, and he was obliged to go up to the platform, turn, bow, and recite his message to his fellow men. Desperate expedients for delay came to him. If he could have engaged the services of a real pain, he would have been glad. But steadily, inexorably, the minutes marched on towards his great crisis, and all his plans for escape blended into a mere panic fear. The maples outside were defeating the weakening rays of the afternoon sun, and in the shadowed schoolroom had come a stillness, in which, nevertheless, one could feel the complacence of the little pupils who had already passed through the flames. They were calmly prepared to recognize as a spectacle the torture of others. Little Johnny Tanner opened the ceremony. He stamped heavily up to the platform and bowed in such a manner that he almost fell down. He blurted out that it would ill befit him to sit silent while the name of his fair Ireland was being reproached, and he appealed to the gallant soldier before him if every British battlefield was not sown with the bones of sons of the Emerald Isle. He was also heard to say that he had listened with deepening surprise and scorn to the insinuation of the honourable member from North Glenmorganshire that the loyalty of the Irish regiments in Her Majesty's service could be questioned. To what purpose, then, he asked, had the blood of Irishmen flowed on 100 fields? To what purpose had Irishmen gone to their death with bravery and devotion in every part of the world where the victorious flag of England had been carried? If the honourable member for North Glenmorganshire insisted upon construing a mere pothouse row between soldiers in Dublin into a grand treachery to the colours and to Her Majesty's uniform, then it was time for Ireland to think bitterly of her dead sons, whose graves now marked every step of England's progress, and yet who could have their honours stripped from them so easily by the honourable member for North Glenmorganshire. Furthermore, the honourable member for North Glenmorganshire— It is needless to say that little Johnny Tanner's language made it exceedingly hot for the honourable member for North Glenmorganshire. But Johnny was not angry, he was only in haste. He finished the honourable member for North Glenmorganshire in what might be called a gallop. Susie Timmins then went to the platform, and with a face as pale as death whisperingly reiterated that she would be Queen of the May. The child represented there a perfect picture of unnecessary suffering. Her small lips were quite blue, and her eyes, opened wide, stared with a look of horror at nothing. The phlegmatic Trass boy, with his moon face only expressing peasant parentage, calmly spoke some undeniably true words concerning destiny. In his seat, Jimmy Trescott was going half blind with fear of his approaching doom. He wished that the Trass boy would talk forever about destiny. If the schoolhouse had taken fire, he thought that he would have felt simply relief. Anything was better. Death amid flames was preferable to a recital of The Charge of the Light Brigade. But the Trass boy finished his remarks about destiny in a very short time. Jimmy heard the teacher call his name, and he felt the whole world look at him. He did not know how he made his way to the stage. Parts of him seemed to be of lead, and at the same time parts of him seemed to be light as air, detached. His face had gone as pale as had been the face of Susie Timmins. He was simply a child in torment. That is all there is to be said specifically about it, and to intelligent people the exhibition would have been not more edifying than a dog fight. He bowed precariously, choked, made an inarticulate sound, and then he suddenly said, "Half a leg." "League," said the teacher coolly. "Half a leg." "League," said the teacher. "League," repeated Jimmy wildly. "Half a league, half a league, half a league onward." He paused here and looked wretchedly at the teacher. "Half a league," he muttered. "Half a league." He seemed likely to keep continuing this phrase indefinitely, so after a time the teacher said, "Well, go on." "Half a league," responded Jimmy. The teacher had the opened book before her, and she read from it, "All in the valley of death rode the—" "Go on," she concluded. Jimmy said, All in the valley of death rode the... He cast a glance of supreme appeal upon the teacher and breathlessly whispered, "Rode the what?" The young woman flushed with indignation to the roots of her hair. "Rode the 600," she snapped at him. The class was a-rustle with delight at this cruel display. They were no better than a Roman populace in Nero's time. Jimmy started off again. Half a league, half a league onward. All in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward, forward, forward. "The Light Brigade," suggested the teacher sharply. "The Light Brigade," said Jimmy. He was about to die of the ignoble pain of his position. As for Tennyson's lines, they had all gone grandly out of his mind, leaving it a whited wall. The teacher's indignation was still rampant. She looked at the miserable wretch before her with an angry stare. "You stay in after school and learn that all over again," she commanded, "and be prepared to speak it next Friday. I am astonished at you, Jimmy. Go to your seat." If she had suddenly and magically made a spirit of him and left him free to soar high above all the travail of our earthly lives, she could not have overjoyed him more. He fled back to his seat without hearing the low-toned jibes of his schoolmates. He gave no thought to the terrors of next Friday. The evils of the day had been sufficient, and to a childish mind a week is a great space of time. With the delightful inconsistency of his age, he sat in blissful calm and watched the sufferings of an unfortunate boy named Zimmerman, who was the next victim of education. Jimmy, of course, did not know that on this day there had been laid for him the foundation of a finished incapacity for public speaking, which would be his until he died. End of Making an Orator.